Welcome back to the Travsessed podcast. We're your hosts, Kim and Aaron. We are healthcare travelers and the creators of Travsessed. And it is Tuesday, so we got another traveler quick tip, and it is a good one. It comes from a question that we just received, and the question is, can you make up your own tax home for your benefit?
It's a great question.
Please prepare for departure.
Okay, so this was a question that we received, which I will just say before, we love this, so please keep them coming. Reach out to us on hello@imtravsessed.com or Kim and Aaron G on Instagram. Instant message us, DM us with your questions, because we want to be giving content that you want to hear about. And if you have specific questions, we want to answer them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this was a specific question, and it was about basically, she was insinuating that she knows other travelers who just make up their tax home because they're saving a lot of money, and if that's something that you really can do, or like, can you just make your tax home anywhere, basically? And because, like, you know, say you live in California, but your mom lives in Florida. And so you're like, I just want to make my mom's house my tax home because Florida has no income tax and it's a lot cheaper and the taxes are lower, and I can just give my mom X amount of dollars a month and like technically rent a room from her, as opposed to like California, that's crazy expensive. Can I just move my tax home to Florida? Okay. So that was the essence of the question. And first off, too, I'll just say, like, Aaron and I are not tax professionals at all. We're just sharing our own experience and the knowledge that we've learned through, you know, speaking to tax professionals and just what we know, okay, to be true in this industry. But you always want to talk with a specific question. Always reach out to a tax professional. We always recommend Joseph Smith. He's a tax professional for healthcare travelers, and you can always call him or them, his company, or email, and if you have a specific question that they'll answer. So
but there are other nomadic accountants out there.
Yeah.
But Joseph Smith is
for like
the
travelers.
only healthcare traveler turned accountant.
Well, that I know of anyway. So
yeah, that we know of, yeah.
Basically, the simple answer is no. Okay, because there are rules and guidelines that you have to follow to set up a proper tax home, a legal tax home. And one of those rules is that you have to establish income in the area that you're claiming as your tax home. And there is, you know, a certain amount of money, a certain amount of time that is required to establish that tax home. I'm not sure exactly what that number is, but that's a great question to ask, you know, a tax professional. Yeah. Because they'll, like, for instance, if you email Joseph Smith, he would be able to give you more of like an exact answer of, hey, if you're trying to make Florida your tax home, then you need to earn, you know, around this much money and be there for this amount of time. And then obviously you have to establish that as your residency, and you have to have your driver's license there, and you have to have a place that you're renting and you're giving monthly rent to every single month, right? So they'll be able to really walk you through what that needs to look like. But technically that is how you are supposed to establish your tax home. You can't just be like, oh, nope, Florida's my new tax home because, you know, my mom lives there. And
or Delaware. You can't just throw a P.O. box in Delaware and say that's my tax home because that's where my mail goes. And Delaware just happens to be a no-income state income tax place. So bing, bang, boom, that's it.
Right. And so, or everybody would do that, right? Yeah. Everyone's like, oh, my tax home's in Florida.
Every traveler's from Florida, Texas, and Delaware.
Yeah. And so there are rules put in place for that. And just remembering, like, what is a tax home there for, right? So a tax home is established. Okay, this is like your home essentially that you are coming back to after you end a contract, or you're going back in between, and like that's where your home you return to. Okay,
which is why we get the per diems.
So, right. So that's what I was going to get into is like, that's the whole reason why we get tax-free money as a traveler is because we have this structure and this home that we are putting money into every single month, but we're not living there permanently because our job requires us to temporarily leave that dwelling, leave that tax home to travel. So say your tax home is in Florida like us, okay? And we're leaving Florida to go work in West Virginia. And then we're leaving Florida to go work in Seattle or California, but we're coming back in between. But our job requires us to go live in these temporary places as contract workers, right? We're not moving there as a full-time employee. It's contracted with the intent to always return back to our tax home in between. Okay, so that's why the IRS looks at our job and says, okay, you're duplicating your expenses because you have this home in Florida, but your job requires you to now rent your apartment in West Virginia. And so to offset those costs, we're going to give you this tax-free stipend that will help go towards your apartment in West Virginia and your food in West Virginia. And so that's like the nature of contract work, and your tax home is what allows you to receive that money, that tax-free money to come in. So that's why it's important to make sure that that is set up properly. Mm-hmm. All of that being said, there are plenty of travelers who don't have proper tax homes set up, or that, just make up their tax home in Florida or something because that helps them save money. And the option is always available. You make your own decisions. Right? Like, we're all capable of making our own decisions of what feels right for us and what we feel okay with. But we're here to give you like the facts or the important information. And then you can take with that what you will and make your own decisions.
Right. And I mean, again, we said at the beginning, like the short answer to exactly what the question is no. That is not a legal thing to do to establish a tax home. You can't just make up something in a state with no income taxes. No, right? There's criteria to establish that tax home. Now, again, like Kim said, are there travelers out there that do it? Yeah, which is kind of a issue that I have within this world that we live in, within like healthcare travelers. People are like, dude, it's not that big of a deal. Like, nobody even checks. Like, just establish your tax home and it's no income state tax, and like I make so much more money because I don't have to pay, and like just do it, right? And that's false information that could lead you down a bad path that if you were audited, you have to look at that, right? You have to say, number one, oh my God, I can't even imagine. Like I just don't want to be audited, and number one. And number two, I don't want to be audited and have misinformation. I have to pay so much money because you're paying back on the fine, plus you're paying back on all of the stipends that as far back as they want to go, and they can go back 7 years and start saying, prove to me that this is your tax home. We gave you tax-free money. You're going to have to pay all of that money back that you owe to the IRS. Like, that's insane. So is lying about your tax home worth that? Mm-hmm. On the flip side of that, yes, some travelers are correct. They're not checking unless you get audited. But like, who is responsible to just know if you're never going to get audited or not? Like, why not do the right thing? Feel it in your bones of like, I'm doing things correctly, no matter who's looking at what I'm doing. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. But I thought this was a great question because this comes up a lot. And I think, just trying to figure out what your best options are as a traveler for a tax home, because the goal is like, you want to make the most money possible. You don't want to have this like crazy rent that you're paying every month, because then it's like traveling may not be that lucrative for you. So there are definitely some options. And if you do want to establish your tax home in, say, Florida, because it's like a long-term game for you and your mom does live there, right? And you could rent a room for her. Explore that option and see what's required for you to establish that as your tax home with the money. Like, it may not even be that much. Like, so I think it's just really do your due diligence, look into it, see what your options are, and then weigh it out from there of what you want to do.
Right. And I think talking to Joseph Smith, because it's funny, like going back to in Traveler School, we interviewed Joseph for like 2 hours. We just like drilled him with all of our questions. And one of the questions that I asked was like, you have everyday lives. So let's say you were like in California and you established your tax home before you even started traveling because you were married to somebody, or you were in a relationship that you thought was going in that direction, and something happens and like you break up and now you have like nowhere to go and you want to start traveling. So you move in with your mom, right? Like that's not illegal to do. Like your life changed dramatically. You left your job, moved to Florida and started traveling. So like that, but that's where Kim's saying, and absolutely correctly, is like talking to a tax professional and just being like,
Yeah.
I had a life change. I want to reestablish my tax home. What is it that I need to do that suffices the IRS's guidelines? And then now you have it, and then you get to make the decision for you what fits best.
Perfect. I think that's it.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you have specific questions, DM us. That's the best way to get a hold of us at Kim and Aaron G. Again, like on these Traveler quick tips, we create them to answer your questions specifically about healthcare traveling from like our thoughts, our experience, our knowledge, right?
Our groups, what they're asking.
Right. But I'm saying we're personally answering these questions as like experts in this industry and knowing this industry. So you're getting information that is correct and not just from like randos that like don't understand how this industry works. So ask us your questions. This is what this is here for. And we will see you guys next Tuesday.